The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Kensington Palace, as William stood in his private study, staring at the newspaper headlines scattered across his mahogany desk. Each one told the same heartbreaking story that had gripped the nation for weeks. A 7-year-old girl named Emma had captured the hearts of millions after her handwritten letter to the royal family went viral on social media. Emma Thompson lived in a small council flat in Manchester with her grandmother, Sarah. Her parents had died in a car accident 18 months earlier, leaving her in the care of her elderly grandmother, who struggled to make ends meet on her pension. The little girl had written to William and Kate after seeing them on television during a charity event for bereaved children. In her innocent handwriting, Emma had poured out her heart. She told them about missing her mummy and daddy, about how she tried to be brave for her grandmother who cried when she thought Emma wasn't looking, and about her dream of meeting a real princess who might understand her sadness. The letter had somehow made its way to a local journalist, and within days, the entire country knew Emma's story. Sarah Thompson had initially been mortified when the letter became public. She hadn't known her granddaughter had sent it, and the sudden media attention overwhelmed the quiet woman who had spent her life avoiding the spotlight. Reporters camped outside their small flat, neighbors whispered as they passed, and well-meaning strangers sent gifts that Sarah felt too proud to accept. At the palace, Kate carefully read Emma's letter for the 5th time that morning. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes, thinking of her own children safe and happy in their nursery upstairs. She could hear Charlotte's laughter echoing through the corridors as she played with her nanny, a sound that seemed almost cruel in light of Emma's loneliness. William noticed his wife's distress as she sat curled in the window seat of their private sitting room, still clutching the letter. They had received thousands of letters over the years, many from children facing unimaginable hardships. But something about Emma's simple honesty had touched them both deeply. The media coverage had become relentless. Television programs featured debates about child poverty. Radio shows took calls from listeners sharing similar stories. And social media buzzed with people demanding the royals respond. Some criticized the royal family for their silence, while others defended their right to privacy in deciding how to help. Meanwhile, in Manchester, Emma continued her daily routine, unaware of the national conversation swirling around her letter. She attended the local primary school, where teachers tried to shield her from the media attention, walked to the corner shop with her grandmother to buy groceries with carefully counted coins, and spent evenings doing homework at the kitchen table while Sarah prepared their simple dinner. The other children at school had started treating Emma differently since the story broke. Some approached her with a mixture of curiosity and sympathy that made her uncomfortable, while others seemed jealous of her newfound fame. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, did her best to maintain normalcy in the classroom, but even she found herself watching Emma more carefully, searching for signs that the attention was affecting the young girl. Emma's grandmother struggled with unexpected emotions as their story spread across the nation. Pride warred with embarrassment. Hope battled with fear of disappointment. And love for her granddaughter mixed with anger at the circumstances that had led to their situation. She had raised 5 children of her own and never asked for help. But watching Emma's quiet sadness had worn down her defenses. In the palace, staff members found themselves unusually invested in this particular case. The household had dealt with countless requests and appeals over the years, but Emma's letter had circulated among them, passed from hand to hand with whispered conversations about the little girl's plight. Even the most hardened courtiers admitted they had been moved by her simple request for understanding. Kate spent hours researching Emma's situation, learning about the family's circumstances through official channels. She discovered that Sarah Thompson had been a factory worker for 40 years before retiring, that she had never missed a day caring for Emma despite her own health problems, and that their small flat was immaculately clean despite their poverty. The pressure from the media and public grew daily. Opinion pieces appeared in major newspapers arguing about the royal family's responsibility to respond to such appeals. Some wrote that they should help every child in need, or help none, while others argued that sometimes a single gesture could represent care for all struggling families. William found himself thinking about Emma during his official engagements, wondering how a 7-year-old had managed to articulate feelings that many adults struggled to express. Her letter spoke of resilience and hope despite devastating loss, qualities that reminded him of his own mother's approach to adversity. The royal couple's children had no idea of the storm brewing around Emma's letter. They played in their privileged world, protected from the harsh realities that many children faced. This contrast wasn't lost on William and Kate, who had always tried to teach their children about their fortunate position while keeping their childhood as normal as possible. As the weeks passed, public interest in Emma's story refused to fade. Charity organizations reported increased donations to children's causes, schools organized fundraising events for local families in need, and communities began reaching out to support their own vulnerable members. One letter from a grieving child had sparked a national conversation about loss, poverty, and compassion. Sarah Thompson watched the news coverage with growing anxiety. She worried about the effect on Emma, who had begun asking questions about why people wanted to talk to her about her parents. The elderly woman had always protected her granddaughter from adult concerns, but the media attention made it impossible to shield her completely. Emma herself remained largely unaware of the impact her letter had made. She continued to sleep with the teddy bear that had belonged to her mother, help her grandmother with simple household tasks, and dream about her parents watching over her from heaven. Her resilience amazed everyone who met her, from teachers to social workers to the journalists who had briefly interviewed her. The palace communications team worked carefully to craft an appropriate response, knowing that their words would be scrutinized by millions. They understood that whatever William and Kate decided to do would set a precedent for future appeals and could either inspire hope or create unrealistic expectations among other struggling families. Late one evening, Kate sat in her study writing her own letter, trying to find words that would comfort a 7-year-old while acknowledging the impossibility of replacing her lost parents. She wrote and rewrote each sentence, knowing that Emma would treasure any response for the rest of her life, and wanting every word to carry genuine love and support. The nation waited with unusual unity for the royal response, setting aside political differences and personal opinions about the monarchy to focus on one child's simple request for understanding. Emma Thompson had unknowingly become a symbol of childhood resilience, reminding adults across the country of the purity of a child's hope and the power of honest emotion to move even the most guarded hearts. The decision came to William and Kate during a quiet Sunday morning as they watched their own children playing in the palace gardens. Charlotte had picked a bouquet of autumn flowers and was carefully arranging them in a small vase, her tongue poking out in concentration just as her mother did when focused on a task. The sight triggered something in Kate's mind, and she turned to William with sudden clarity in her eyes. They would visit Emma, but not as a public spectacle or media event. This would be a private gesture, a quiet moment between one family and another, away from cameras and crowds. The decision felt right in a way that surprised them both with its simplicity. The planning required delicate coordination with palace security and Emma's family. Sarah Thompson nearly dropped the phone when a gentle voice introduced herself as someone calling on behalf of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. The elderly woman's hands shook as she listened to the careful explanation that their Royal Highnesses would very much like to meet Emma privately, if that would be acceptable. Sarah's first instinct was to refuse. Their small flat wasn't suitable for royalty, she protested. She had nothing proper to serve them. No fine china or elegant furniture. The voice on the phone gently assured her that none of those things mattered. That William and Kate simply wanted to spend time with Emma as people, not as royalty visiting subjects. Emma overheard part of the conversation and approached her grandmother with wide eyes full of questions. When Sarah hung up the phone, she sat heavily in her worn armchair and tried to explain that the prince and princess wanted to visit them. Emma's first question wasn't about meeting royalty, but whether the princess would be sad like her, whether she would understand about missing parents. The media remained completely unaware of the planned visit. Palace staff worked with extraordinary discretion, arranging security details that would be invisible to neighbors and coordinating timing that would allow William and Kate to arrive without fanfare. Even Emma's school wasn't informed, with the visit scheduled for a Saturday afternoon when most people would be occupied with weekend activities. On the chosen day, Emma helped her grandmother clean their already spotless flat. They dusted surfaces that didn't need dusting, organized books that were already in perfect order, and polished the few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to Emma's mother. The nervous energy helped them both cope with the surreal reality of expecting royal visitors. William and Kate arrived in an unmarked car with minimal security, walking up to the modest building like any other visitors. Kate carried a simple bouquet of flowers, not the elaborate arrangements usually associated with royal visits, but something she had chosen herself from a local florist that morning. When Sarah opened the door, she was struck by how normal they appeared. Kate wore a simple sweater and jeans. William was dressed casually in chinos and a jacket, and both of them smiled with genuine warmth rather than the formal expressions she had expected. They asked to be called by their first names, a request that flustered Sarah until Emma, with the confidence of childhood, immediately addressed them as William and Kate. The visit began awkwardly, as such encounters often do, but Emma's natural curiosity quickly broke through the formal atmosphere. She asked Kate if being a princess was fun, whether she lived in a castle with towers, and if she had ever met a dragon. Kate's genuine laughter at these questions relaxed everyone, and soon they were sitting around Sarah's small kitchen table, sharing tea and biscuits. William found himself drawn into conversation with Sarah about her experiences raising Emma, learning about the practical challenges of caring for a grieving child on a limited budget. The elderly woman's strength impressed him as she spoke about sleepless nights when Emma had nightmares, the careful budgeting required to buy school uniforms, and the way she had learned to answer difficult questions about death and loss. Kate sat with Emma, listening as the little girl showed her drawings she had made of her parents, photographs treasured in a small album, and the teddy bear that still smelled faintly of her mother's perfume. There was no pretense in Emma's sharing, no awareness that she was speaking to someone the world considered special. She simply talked to Kate as one person who might understand sadness to another. The conversation naturally turned to Emma's letter, and she admitted she had written it because she thought a princess might know about being sad sometimes. Her reasoning was heartbreaking in its innocence. Princesses in stories often lost their parents or faced difficult situations, so surely a real princess would understand how hard it was to be brave when everything felt scary. Kate struggled to maintain her composure as Emma explained her daily routine of talking to her parents' photograph before bed, telling them about her day, and asking them to watch over her grandmother. The little girl's faith that her parents could still hear her was both beautiful and heartbreaking. A child's way of maintaining connection with those she had lost. William shared carefully chosen stories about losing his own mother, speaking to Emma in language appropriate for her age, while acknowledging the reality of grief. He told her about still missing his mother every day, about how talking to people who cared helped when sadness felt too big, and about how love for someone doesn't disappear even when they do. The visit stretched longer than planned, as natural conversation flowed between the unlikely group. Emma showed Kate her schoolwork, particularly proud of a story she had written about a little girl who learned to fly so she could visit heaven. Sarah demonstrated how she had taught Emma to cook simple meals, a skill that helped the little girl feel useful and capable despite her circumstances. As afternoon faded toward evening, the reality of their situation became impossible to ignore. Emma's worn school shoes sat by the door, neatly polished, but clearly outgrown. Her winter coat hung on a hook, adequate but thin for the approaching cold months. The refrigerator displayed Emma's artwork and school notices, but also carefully clipped coupons, and a grocery list written in Sarah's careful handwriting. Kate and William exchanged glances, communicating silently as couples do, and Kate quietly asked Sarah if they might speak privately for a moment. In the small hallway, she gently explained that they wanted to help, not as charity or publicity, but as one family helping another. Sarah's pride warred with her love for Emma, and tears filled her eyes as she struggled to respond. The offer wasn't for money or dramatic assistance, but for practical support that would make a real difference. Help with Emma's education, ensuring she had proper winter clothes, assistance with Sarah's own health needs that she had been ignoring due to cost. Most importantly, they offered ongoing friendship, regular contact that would let Emma know she wasn't alone in the world. When they returned to the kitchen, Emma was carefully drawing a picture for them to take home. It showed 4 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, with "My new friends" written in careful letters across the bottom. The simple gift moved both royal visitors more than any elaborate present ever had. As the visit drew to a close, Kate knelt down to Emma's level and made a promise that would stay with the little girl forever. She told Emma that she could write to her anytime, that someone who cared would always read her letters, and that being sad sometimes didn't mean she wasn't brave. The hug they shared was captured by no cameras, witnessed by no crowds, but felt by everyone in that small kitchen. Sarah walked them to the door, still overwhelmed by what had transpired. As they said goodbye, William quietly pressed his business card into her hand, telling her to call if Emma ever needed anything at all. The sincerity in his voice convinced her that this wasn't empty politeness but a genuine commitment. After they left, Emma and Sarah sat in their small living room processing what had happened. Emma clutched a small gift Kate had brought, a children's book about a young princess who learned that true strength came from kindness rather than crowns. Sarah held a handwritten note from Kate, expressing her admiration for Sarah's dedication to Emma and her hope that they could stay in touch. The visit remained secret from the media, known only to a small circle of trusted palace staff and the security team who had facilitated it. No photographs were released, no statements were issued, and no publicity was generated. It was exactly what William and Kate had intended. A private moment of human connection that belonged only to those who had shared it. That night, Emma fell asleep easily for the first time in months, the book from Kate clutched in her arms alongside her mother's teddy bear. Sarah sat up late, reading Kate's note repeatedly and marveling at how the day had transformed from ordinary Saturday afternoon into something that would stay with them forever. Neither of them could have imagined that this quiet visit was only the beginning of a story that would eventually touch millions of hearts across the nation. 3 months after their private visit, William and Kate faced an unexpected decision that would test their commitment to Emma and challenge their approach to royal duties. A prominent documentary filmmaker had learned about Emma's story and approached the palace with a proposal to create a film about childhood resilience, with Emma as the central figure. The potential to raise awareness and funds for grieving children was enormous, but so was the risk to Emma's privacy and normal development. The debate within palace walls was intense. Senior advisors saw an opportunity to demonstrate the royal family's modern approach to connecting with ordinary citizens, while others worried about exploiting a vulnerable child for positive publicity. The decision, they all agreed, ultimately belonged to Emma's family and the royal couple, who had promised to protect her interests. Sarah Thompson struggled with the proposal when it was carefully explained to her during a phone conversation with Kate. The potential financial benefits could secure Emma's future education and provide security Sarah had never dreamed possible. Yet the grandmother's instincts warned her about the dangers of putting a 7-year-old girl in the international spotlight, especially one still processing profound grief. Emma's own opinion, when asked in age-appropriate terms, was characteristically innocent. She wanted to help other children who missed their parents, but she also worried about people watching her all the time like they did on television. Her concerns weren't about fame or attention, but about whether cameras would scare away her parents' spirits if they tried to visit her in dreams. William and Kate visited Emma and Sarah again, this time specifically to discuss the documentary proposal face to face. They sat in the same kitchen where their friendship had begun, but now the conversation carried weight that extended far beyond their small circle. Kate held Emma's hand as they talked, while William worked to ensure Sarah understood all the implications of agreeing to participate. The documentary team had proposed following Emma's daily life for 6 months, capturing her journey through grief recovery while highlighting the support systems that helped children in similar situations. They wanted to film her at school, at home with Sarah, during therapy sessions, and in moments of both sadness and joy. The invasion of privacy would be significant, but the potential positive impact on other families could be immeasurable. As discussions continued, an unexpected voice joined the conversation. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had noticed concerning changes in Emma's behavior since the initial media attention around her letter. The little girl had become more withdrawn at school, seemed anxious about being watched, and had started asking if people were taking pictures of her during normal activities. This information deeply troubled William and Kate, who had hoped their private support would help Emma feel more secure rather than more vulnerable. They realized that even their well-intentioned involvement had altered Emma's world in ways they hadn't anticipated, adding pressure to a child who was already carrying an enormous emotional burden. Sarah found herself torn between competing desires to protect Emma and to provide opportunities that might improve their circumstances. Late at night, she would sit in her small living room, wrestling with decisions that felt too large for one elderly woman to make alone. The weight of choosing Emma's path forward felt overwhelming when she had never expected to be raising another child at her age. Emma sensed the adults' tension, even when they tried to shield her from their discussions. Children often understand emotional undercurrents better than adults realize, and Emma had become particularly attuned to worry and sadness since losing her parents. She began drawing pictures that showed herself surrounded by many watching eyes, a child's way of expressing feelings she couldn't articulate. The decision came during an unexpected moment of clarity. Emma was playing quietly in her grandmother's garden, talking to a butterfly that had landed on her hand, when Sarah realized that her granddaughter's simple joy in that private moment was exactly what needed protecting. The innocence and wonder that had survived Emma's tremendous loss were too precious to risk for any documentary, no matter how well-intentioned. When Sarah called Kate to decline the documentary opportunity, she was surprised by the immediate relief she heard in the Duchess's voice. Kate admitted that she and William had been hoping the family would refuse, but hadn't wanted to influence the decision since they weren't the ones who would live with the consequences. Their primary concern had always been Emma's well-being, not the potential positive publicity for themselves or their causes. The documentary proposal was quietly withdrawn, but the conversation had sparked something unexpected within the royal household. Kate began developing ideas for supporting grieving children that wouldn't require individual families to sacrifice their privacy. She researched existing programs, consulted with child psychologists, and explored ways to create systemic change, rather than focusing on one compelling story. William found himself reflecting on his own experiences with media attention as a child following his mother's death. He remembered the feeling of being watched constantly, of having his grief analyzed and discussed by strangers, and he was determined to ensure Emma never experienced that particular form of suffering. The protection of one little girl had become deeply personal for both royal parents. Meanwhile, Emma's life gradually settled into a new normal that included regular contact with her royal friends. Kate sent encouraging notes when Emma faced difficult days. William called occasionally to check on both Emma and Sarah, and gifts arrived at thoughtful moments without fanfare or publicity. The support was consistent but careful, present without being overwhelming. The media gradually moved on to other stories, but Emma's impact on the royal family continued to resonate in ways that would influence their approach to charitable work for years to come. Kate began making unannounced visits to children's grief counseling centers, spending time with families without publicity or formal ceremonies. William incorporated discussions about childhood bereavement into his mental health advocacy work, speaking from a more personal perspective than ever before. Emma's 8th birthday approached with excitement that surprised Sarah with its normalcy. For the first time since her parents' death, Emma seemed genuinely excited about celebrating, planning a small party with school friends, and looking forward to being a year older. The milestone represented healing that had seemed impossible just months earlier. Kate and William's gift for Emma's birthday was carefully chosen. Not expensive or elaborate, but deeply meaningful. They gave her a journal with a note explaining that sometimes writing down thoughts and feelings helped when talking felt too difficult. They also included photographs from their visits, giving Emma tangible memories of their friendship that belonged only to her. The birthday party itself was small and simple, held in Sarah's tiny living room with 3 school friends, homemade cake, and party games that required no special equipment. Emma's joy was infectious, her laughter filling spaces that had been quiet for too long. Sarah watched her granddaughter blow out candles and make a silent wish, knowing that whatever Emma had asked for, it wasn't the return of her parents, but something new and hopeful for her future. As autumn returned, marking a full year since Emma's letter had first captured national attention, the little girl had grown in ways that transcended age and height. She still missed her parents every day, still talked to their photograph before bed, and still needed extra comfort during thunderstorms and other reminders of the accident that had changed her life. But she had also learned that new people could care about her without trying to replace what she had lost. Sarah Thompson had transformed as well, discovering strength she hadn't known she possessed, and accepting help without losing her dignity. The support from William and Kate had allowed her to address her own health issues, ensuring she could continue caring for Emma for many years to come. Their friendship had given both grandmother and granddaughter something neither had expected to find: hope for a future that honored their past while embracing new possibilities. The story of Emma's letter and the royal response had indeed swept the nation with tears. But not through publicity or media coverage. Instead, it had spread through the quieter channels of human connection. Conversations between friends about the power of simple kindness. Discussions in families about reaching out to those in need, and personal reflections on how individual actions could create ripples of compassion that extended far beyond their original scope. Emma Thompson had unknowingly taught an entire nation that sometimes the most profound gestures happen away from cameras and crowds, in small kitchens and modest living rooms, where genuine human connection flourishes. Her innocent request for understanding had been answered not with fanfare, but with friendship, proving that the most powerful royal prerogative isn't ceremony or tradition, but the simple choice to care about someone who needs it. The silent gesture had indeed moved millions, not because they witnessed it, but because they felt its impact in countless acts of kindness, inspired by one little girl's courage to ask for help and one royal couple's decision to answer with their hearts rather than their protocols.